Picture a battlefield shrouded in smoke where the destiny of entire empires hangs in the balance. It's May 11th, 1745, and the rolling fields of Dutch Austria, now modern-day Belgium, are about to become the stage for one of the most dramatic military confrontations of the 18th century. On one side stands the mighty French army, a formidable force led by the brilliant and sickly Marshal Maurice de Saxe. On the other, an alliance of British, Dutch and Hanoverian troops known as the Pragmatic Army, united with a single burning purpose: to halt the relentless French advance across Europe. This wasn't just another battle. This was a clash that would echo through history, a moment where strategy, courage and sheer audacity would determine the fate of nations. The War of the Austrian Succession had been raging for 5 years, a complex conflict that drew in the greatest powers of Europe like pieces on an enormous bloody chessboard. At its heart was a simple yet explosive question: who would control the vast territories and shifting political landscape of the continent? Imagine the tension, imagine the stakes. Thousands of soldiers, their uniforms crisp, their hearts pounding, facing each other across a landscape that would soon be transformed by cannon fire and cavalry charges. The French, confident and strategic; the Pragmatic Army, disciplined and determined. But here's the truly fascinating part. How could the French possibly triumph against an alliance that seemed far superior in numbers and resources? What secret weapon, what incredible strategy could possibly turn the tide of this monumental battle? Get ready to uncover a story of military genius, unexpected twists, and a confrontation that would reshape the very map of Europe. If you're passionate about history, if you love diving into the untold stories of how empires rise and fall, then buckle up. The Battle of Fontenoy is about to unfold before your eyes. Are you ready to step back in time and witness one of the most dramatic military encounters of the 18th century? Don't miss a single moment of this incredible historical journey. To truly understand the Battle of Fontenoy, we must first step back and unravel the complex political tapestry of 18th century Europe. The year was 1740, and a seismic shift was about to rock the foundations of European power. Imagine a young woman, Maria Theresa of Austria, suddenly thrust into the spotlight after the death of her father, Emperor Charles VI. She was barely 23 years old, inheriting a vast empire at a moment of unprecedented vulnerability. Her father had spent years carefully arranging royal marriages and political alliances to protect her right to the throne. But the moment he died, vultures began to circle. European powers saw this as their golden opportunity. Like predators sensing weakness, kingdoms from Prussia to France began to plot and scheme. Each wanted a piece of the Austrian territories. Each believed they could challenge the young empress's claim. And at the center of this political storm was France, hungry for expansion and territorial gain. The War of the Austrian Succession was not just a military conflict. It was a high-stakes chess game where kingdoms would rise or fall based on their strategic moves. France, led by King Louis XV, saw a chance to challenge the existing European order. Other powers like Prussia, Bavaria, and Spain joined the fray, each with their own ambitions and territorial desires. But here's a fascinating tidbit that reveals the strange code of honor that existed even in the midst of such brutal conflict. During the Battle of Fontenoy, something extraordinary happened that would be remembered for generations. As the French and British troops faced each other, preparing for what would be a devastating battle, an almost unbelievable moment of courtesy transpired. A British officer, standing mere meters from certain death, called out to the French, "Gentlemen of France, please fire first." The French officers, caught between surprise and a peculiar sense of battlefield etiquette, responded with equal politeness. "No, gentlemen of England, we insist that you fire first." It was a moment of almost theatrical gallantry, a brief glimpse of humanity in the brutal machinery of war. Moments later, that same politeness would give way to a savage and bloody confrontation that would reshape the map of Europe. The Battle of Fontenoy was more than just a single engagement. It was a crucible where the balance of power would be tested, where strategies would be challenged, and where the ambitions of entire nations would collide in a thunderous, earth-shattering conflict. Were these soldiers aware that their actions would echo through history? Could they have known that this single battle would become a turning point, a moment that would define an entire era of European warfare? Let me introduce you to two extraordinary men whose destinies would collide on a blood-soaked battlefield in 1745. Two commanders who would become legendary symbols of military leadership. On the French side stood Maurice de Saxe, a man who would become one of the most remarkable military commanders in European history. Picture a brilliant strategist literally fighting two battles simultaneously, one against the enemy and another against his own failing health. Maurice was gravely ill, racked by a body that was betraying him, yet his mind remained razor-sharp and his spirit unbreakable. Born in Germany but serving France with absolute devotion, Maurice de Saxe was no ordinary commander. He was a military genius who seemed to understand warfare like a chess grandmaster understands complex game strategies. Despite being confined to a chair, wrapped in blankets and often burning with fever, he would direct his troops with an almost supernatural precision. His soldiers didn't just respect him, they were utterly devoted to him. On the opposing side stood Prince William Augustus, the Duke of Cumberland, heir to the British throne and commander of the Pragmatic Army. Young, confident, and supremely assured of his military superiority, Cumberland represented the classic 18th century aristocratic warrior. He believed in overwhelming force, disciplined formations, and the pure mathematical logic of military engagement. The Duke of Cumberland was everything Maurice de Saxe was not. Where Saxe was subtle and strategic, Cumberland was direct and confrontational. Where Saxe understood the psychological aspects of warfare, Cumberland trusted in raw numerical superiority. He looked at his troops, a magnificent alliance of British, Dutch, and Hanoverian soldiers, and was convinced that sheer numbers would guarantee victory. But warfare, as history would dramatically prove that day, is never that simple. Imagine these two men. Maurice de Saxe, pale and weak, hunched over maps and planning his ingenious strategies. Prince Cumberland, standing tall and proud, confident in his seemingly invincible army. Neither knew that their personal confrontation would become a legendary moment in military history. One was fighting with his brilliant mind, the other with traditional military might. One was physically broken, but strategically undefeated. The other was young, strong, and brimming with confidence. Who would emerge victorious? A sick strategist or a healthy traditionalist? The stage was set for one of the most unexpected confrontations in European military history. War is often a game of deception, and no commander understood this better than Maurice de Saxe. As the Pragmatic Army approached, the French had prepared a trap so brilliant it would become legendary, a military masterstroke that would transform the battlefield into a killing field. Picture the landscape of Fontenoi. The French had spent hours meticulously crafting their defense, transforming the terrain into a deadly maze. Strategic trenches carved into the earth, cannons positioned with surgical precision, every inch calculated to maximum advantage. This wasn't just a defensive line. This was a predator's hunting ground. The Pragmatic Army, led by the Duke of Cumberland, approached with absolute confidence. Their formation was a marvel of military discipline, a massive, compact block of soldiers moving like a single organism. They believed their numbers and their rigid training would simply overwhelm any resistance. They were walking into a trap they couldn't even see. Maurice de Saxe had an ace up his sleeve, a strategy so audacious it bordered on genius. He gave his soldiers a counterintuitive order that would shock military strategists for generations. Hold your fire. Wait. As the enemy drew closer and closer, tension mounted. Imagine the British and Allied soldiers marching forward, their boots creating a rhythmic thunder across the battlefield. Imagine the French soldiers, disciplined and patient, waiting with fingers on triggers, hearts racing. And then, when the enemy was merely meters away, barely a stone's throw, Saxe gave the order to fire. The result was devastating. A wall of lead and fire erupted from the French lines, tearing through the compact Allied formations. Soldiers, who moments before were marching with supreme confidence, were now falling by the hundreds. The battlefield transformed from a scene of military precision to absolute chaos in mere seconds. This was more than a tactical maneuver. This was psychological warfare at its most brutal and brilliant. The French hadn't just defeated an army, they had systematically destroyed their enemy's spirit of invincibility. Can you imagine the courage it takes to wait until the enemy is almost upon you before firing? Would you have the nerves of steel that these French soldiers demonstrated? Drop a comment and let us know what you think about battlefield strategy and the thin line between bravery and madness. And if you're loving these deep dives into historical moments that changed the world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because history isn't just about dates and facts. It's about incredible human stories waiting to be told. In the brutal theatre of 18th century warfare, victory often hinged on a single, breathtaking moment. And at Fontenoi, that moment was about to unfold in a way no one could have predicted. The battlefield was already chaos. The French initial volley had torn through the Pragmatic Army's perfect formations. Soldiers were falling, panic was spreading, and what had seemed like an inevitable Allied victory was now crumbling before their eyes. And then came the masterstroke. From the French lines, a thundering sound arose, the unmistakable rhythm of cavalry hooves. Maurice de Saxe had held his most devastating weapon in reserve, a cavalry charge that would strike like lightning. Picture the scene. Exhausted Allied soldiers, still reeling from the initial French assault, suddenly realize they are about to be hit from an unexpected direction. The French cavalry, magnificent and terrifying, swept across the battlefield like a storm of steel and horseflesh. This was not just an attack. This was a surgical strike designed to destroy not just bodies, but morale. The Duke of Cumberland watched in horror as his carefully constructed army began to disintegrate. The Pragmatic Army, once so confident, was now a scattered, panicked mass. Soldiers, who moments before believed in their invincibility, were now only thinking of survival. Under this relentless assault, the Allied forces had no choice. They were forced to do the unthinkable, retreat. The battlefield that had promised glory now became a path of humiliation. This was more than a battle. This was a transformative moment for France. King Louis XV had just seen his military might dramatically demonstrated on the European stage. The victory at Fontenoi wasn't just a win, it was a statement. France was declaring its power, its strategic brilliance, its ability to challenge and defeat the greatest armies of Europe. The repercussions would echo for decades. This single battle opened the door for future French conquests, reshaping the political landscape of an entire continent. Maurice de Saxe had not just won a battle, he had rewritten the rules of warfare. In the grand chess game of 18th century European politics, France had just made a move that would be remembered for generations. Some battles are more than just moments of conflict. Some battles become turning points that reshape entire worlds. The Battle of Fontenoy was one such extraordinary moment, a pivotal event that would echo through the corridors of military history for generations to come. Imagine a single battle that would challenge everything military leaders thought they knew about warfare. Fontenoy was not just a clash of armies, it was a revolution in military thinking. Maurice de Saxe had done something unprecedented. He proved that raw numbers mean nothing without strategy, that courage and innovation could triumph over sheer military might. A sickly commander had outsmarted a seemingly invincible alliance, turning traditional military wisdom on its head. This battle marked the dawn of a new era in warfare. Gone were the days of rigid, predictable military formations. Fontenoi demonstrated that flexibility, psychological warfare, and strategic positioning could overcome brute force. The French had introduced a new language of combat, one of dynamic tactics, intelligent positioning, and psychological manipulation. The innovative use of fortifications, the strategic patience in waiting to fire, the brilliant cavalry charge, these were not just tactical decisions. They were a blueprint for future military engagements. Military academies across Europe would study this battle for decades, dissecting every moment, every decision. For France, Fontenoy was more than a victory. It was a statement of national pride, a declaration that French military genius could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest powers of Europe. King Louis XV had not just won a battle, he had elevated France's global reputation. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Fontenoy was a human one. It showed that leadership is not about numbers, but about vision. It proved that a brilliant mind could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. Maurice de Saxe, weak in body but strong in spirit, became a symbol of human potential. Think about it. A commander fighting not just an external enemy, but his own failing health. A man who transformed a potential defeat into a legendary victory through nothing more than intelligence, courage, and unbreakable will. Fontenoy reminds us that history is not written by the largest armies, but by those brave enough to reimagine what's possible. Would you have had the courage to wait, to plan, to believe in a strategy that seemed impossible? Would you have trusted a leader like Maurice de Saxe? History is not just about dates and facts. It's about human stories of incredible courage, unexpected triumph, and the power of human imagination. As we close this incredible chapter of military history, let's take a moment to truly absorb the extraordinary story of Fontenoy. This wasn't just a battle. This was a symphony of human complexity, where strategy danced with courage, where weakness transformed into strength, where the unexpected became legendary. Imagine for a moment the sheer audacity of what happened that day. A sick commander, Maurice de Saxe, lying on a chair, orchestrating a military masterpiece that would reshape the entire European landscape. A young duke believing in the pure mathematics of military might, only to discover that war is never about simple numbers. The Battle of Fontenoy teaches us something profound about human potential. It reminds us that greatness often emerges from the most unexpected places, that strategy can triumph over brute force, that one person's vision can change the course of history. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Would you have the nerves of steel to wait until the enemy was mere meters away before giving the order to fire? Would you risk everything on a single breathtaking cavalry charge? Would you lead an army while fighting not just an external enemy, but your own failing body? These weren't just soldiers. These were human beings making split-second decisions that would echo through generations. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. If you were Maurice de Saxe, what would you have done differently? If you were the Duke of Cumberland, how would you have approached this impossible situation? History isn't just about remembering dates and facts. It's about understanding the incredible human stories behind those moments. It's about recognizing the extraordinary potential that lies within ordinary people. If you love diving deep into this incredible historical moment, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who loves a good story of unexpected triumph. Subscribe to Modern Age Chronicles because we've got countless more incredible stories waiting to be told. History is calling. Are you listening? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop wondering about the incredible stories that have shaped our world.